Hello everybody and welcome. In this video, what we're going to review are the Vlookup best practices that I've picked up in all my years of using Microsoft Excel. Now, we'll briefly run through the 5 best practices that I've picked up, and then we'll go over them in detail a little bit later in the video. So best practice number 1 is to make sure you have your lookup table in the same file in which you have your formula. The second best practice is to make sure you expand your range to include more rows and columns than what is currently needed. Best practice number 3 is to lock your criteria as well as lock your range. Number 4 is to use the naming convention for your range, and I'll show you how to do this a little bit later on in the video. And the 5th and final, if you know you're going to encounter a lot of non-matches, it's always best to use an if error. So with all this being said, let's get into today's lesson. Hello everybody and welcome to today's lesson. The first best practice that we're going to go over is making sure that you have your lookup table in the same file as your formula. The reason why I say this is because if you are getting your lookup table from another file, it might be shared on a shared drive, right, in a corporate environment. If that file, if the destination path changes, right, like if it moves to a new folder or the name changes or if the file gets deleted, then in your file, you're going to end up with a bunch of errors, right? You're going to end up with a bunch of NAs and you don't want that. So instead of doing that, make sure that you put all of your lookup tables in the same file as your actual formula, right? So I could come over here and do this for you very quickly here, right? So I want the different seasons. I'm going to come here. And then you could see that my lookup table is in the exact same file as my actual formula, right? So now if the file changes paths, right, if it gets saved in a different folder, or if I change the name of the file, I'm not going to end up with an error. Best practice number 2 is you want to expand your range to include more columns and rows than what you currently have or what is currently needed. And I'll show you exactly what I mean here. So if I go equals Vlookup, now, when I go into my lookup table here, instead of just selecting the data that I have here and locking this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to come all the way to the top, and you see where A gets highlighted. I'm going to come and I'm going to select that entire column, A, B, C, and D, right? So now, no matter how many rows I add to the bottom of this, I don't need to adjust my formula. So as I'm adding data to the bottom of this list, starting on row 14 and below that, my formula is going to pick up everything and I do not need to adjust my formula later on. I'm going to take it one step further and I'm also going to highlight 5 additional columns. So you can see I have columns E to column I that has been formatted. I don't have any data there yet, but maybe in the future I do. So what I like doing, I like selecting the entire range, right? So I'm going to go in here, hit F4. I'm going to lock that. Now I'm going to bring in the event. And there you go. So for best practice number 3, what I always say here is you want to lock your criteria as well as your range, right? And I've been doing that on the first 2 examples. You might have already seen that, but I'll show you again what I'm doing here. So Vlookup, I'm looking at January here, and I'm going to lock on the column, right? So for the lookup value, I want to make sure that column A is locked. Also for the table array, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select everything here and I'm going to lock that, right? Or if I continue on with the example for best practice number 2, I'm going to lock all the way down to the last row, right? or this is supposed to be the event name. Let me change that to 3. And now you could see that no matter if I copy, right, even to the right hand side here, it's going to give me the criteria that I'm looking for. It's going to give me the lookup value that I'm looking for. And the reason for that is because I locked column A as well as my entire range, right? So you do this because as you're copying and pasting, whether you're copying and pasting vertically, horizontally, the criteria is locked as well as the entire lookup range. Now, before we move on to best practice number 4, there is one thing that I'd like to talk to you about first. Today's sponsor of the video is me. Just in case you don't already know, I have a Microsoft Excel course in which you could go from zero to hero in Microsoft Excel. I have over 100 different lecture videos individually bookmarked so that you can learn at your own pace. So for example, if you'd like to know about VLOOKUPs, I have a couple of videos on VLOOKUP. If it's pivot tables that you're after, I have an entire chapter on pivot tables. So if you'd like to accelerate your knowledge and go from beginner to pro in Microsoft Excel, my course is the course for you, and the link is in the comment section below. Now let's get back into the video. Welcome back, everybody. Now let's go over best practice number 4. This is more of an optional best practice. It's something I used to utilize earlier on in my career. I don't use it as much anymore, but that's not to say that it's not valuable. What I'm talking about here is naming your table, right? So your lookup table, you could actually go in and name it, right? So especially if you have a lookup table that's going to remain fixed, let's say the seasons of the year that we have here in North America, right? You could go in and name it, and then in your VLOOKUP, when you're building out your formula, you don't actually have to go to your lookup tab. So I'll show you what I mean here. So this lookup number 4, we have the month as well as the season, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select all the data here, and I'm going to come up here in the top left corner, and you can see right now, you see that A1, it's highlighted in blue. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to name this. I'm going to name this data range seasons. Right? So now I'm going to come back into best practice number 4, the tab here. I'm going to build up my lookup. And now I'm going to type in seasons. And you could see it brings me the season. So that's a neat little trick that you could use. And then the 5th and final, best practice number 5, if you know you're going to have a few non-matches, right, and you want your data to look clean, use an if error. So I'll show you what I mean here. So VLOOKUP, Autumn Festival. I'm going to go into my lookup number 5. I'm going to lock this. Right? And you could see there's a few here that have these NAs. These NAs, if you have enough of them in your file, it might bring some scrutiny to your data, right? You don't want anyone really questioning the integrity of your data. So to make this look way cleaner, what you would do, you would just embed the VLOOKUP with an if error, right? So here, I could put anything in between the quotations. For now, I'm just going to keep it blank. And you could see when I drag that formula down, it looks just way cleaner. There's no NAs. There's no green triangles in the top left corner. Of course, I don't have to keep it blank. I could always put not found and drag that all the way down. So that concludes the lesson for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed my VLOOKUP best practices. Before we end the video, let's go to the outro. Hey everyone, this brings us to the end of the video. I would really like to get your feedback. So if you thought this was a good video, if you thought there's areas in which I could improve, I would appreciate you going in the comments section below and letting me know. Also, if you did like the video, I would really appreciate if you could hit the like button. Also, if you like the kind of content that I'm doing in this channel, if you could subscribe, that would help me out a lot and I would really appreciate it. Like I always say, everybody, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, keep fit and have fun.